The Stack. People, Business, Technology. With Dan Tomaszewski of Everything MSP.
Hello, everybody. Dan Tomaszewski here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to this week's episode of The Stack, where we focus on people, business, and technology. Today, we're going to dive into the critical world of backup and recovery for managed service providers. In this episode, we'll explore how MSPs can safeguard their clients' businesses from data loss nightmares like ransomware, human error, natural disasters, and so much more. We'll uncover some strategies and tools that ensure business continuity, minimize downtime, and ultimately protect the lifeblood of any organization, which is its data. So buckle up and get ready to learn how to become your client's data guardian. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a special guest from Comet Backup. I have Mason Giles. I just moved his two names together. I've got Mason Giles from Comet Backup. And let's go ahead and bring Mason in here. How you doing today, Mason?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Actually, that name mix-up happens reasonably often for me, so don't worry about it.
Does it? That's awesome. So, well, it's funny with my name, Dan Tomaszewski. A lot of times people call me Tom. They forget Dan, and they think Tomaszewski. And so my apologies on that. But it's great to have you on again. How are things been going for you?
Yeah, really well. So we had a good long chat, I think, on your Take 5 about this time last year, actually. And it's been a really interesting year for Comet since then. I think at that time we last spoke, we had just launched our VMware backup capability.
Oh, that's right.
And boy, we were really unlucky on the timing on that, because Broadcom's acquisition of VMware, I think, has been pretty unpopular, to say the least. And
right.
Thinking about that, I think all the MSPs are now, they've been through the stages of grief, the anger, the bargaining, and now we're solidly in that last sort of acceptance period where with VMware, either you've migrated or you've got your migration plan ready. From our side, we've really put a focus on our Hyper-V support as a response. And our Hyper-V backup is now a lot faster, it's sharp, it's snappy, and we're a great option if you've moved from VMware to Hyper-V.
Nice. And so you're getting a lot of traction on that side?
Yeah, actually, it's been really popular. So yeah, that's been great. So that's one thing that happened in the last year, but I think that's annoying. But the top disaster people are talking about right now has got to be CrowdStrike, right?
Right. Yeah, I think the conversation has definitely changed. And so before we jump into the nitty gritty, for those that aren't maybe have not seen your past episode, maybe you could give us a little background about yourself and as well as your experience in the backup and disaster recovery space.
Sure. So my name's Mason Giles, and I've been working for Comet Backup since it was founded in about 2016, and we've become one of the leading, I would say, white label backup products for MSPs. So it's a backup system. It's backup for PCs, Windows, Mac, Linux. It's client server, supports almost everything under the sun. So Hyper-V and VMware backups, but also SQL Server, MySQL, things like that. And it does deduplication. You can use cloud storage or bring your own storage. We have our own storage offering, but it's optional. So it's just really flexible, and it's really designed with an MSP mindset through and through.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is important for MSPs because they don't want to be tied down to one particular format. So if first and foremost, depending on the backup needs, it sounds like you go anywhere from A to Z from that perspective. But whether or not they want to, leverage you for the actual backup storage or connect to another, solution, that's exactly what I think most MSPs are looking for, that flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. We can recommend a lot of cloud storage providers, but if one thing that's particularly interesting is regional support. If you're based in the US, there's obviously lots of excellent US options available to you, but we have customers in Germany and customers in France who will really prefer to use a local French storage provider or something for that better legal compliance. So just having the flexibility baked in has been really good for us.
Yeah. So what are some of the barriers to adoption with backup, and how can IT service providers mitigate those barriers for their clients?
Right. Barriers to adoption. So I hope we've got a lot of MSPs listening. MSPs who are out there selling will know firsthand better than me what the barriers to adoption are. As CTO, I'm a few layers away from the front line, but from me talking to MSPs and from our sales reps and customer success and support teams talking to MSPs, I can tell you my summary. And the way I like to think about the barriers is there's a concept for salespeople about the sales process where each prospect that comes in goes from through the funnel of awareness to interest, evaluation, and action. And there's steps that a lead goes through to learn about the product. So they first become aware of it, and then eventually they finally take an action. And at each step, there's different roadblocks. So thinking about those different steps, the bulk of people, some people just don't know they need it. So there's backup, people don't think they need it. There's people stuck in the first stage, the awareness stage. And I've thought about, how you resolve this for different market verticals. For MSPs, the key point is really, or not exactly irrelevant, but it's a sideline, because as an MSP, you're responsible for providing the customer with whatever technical solution they need, right? The customer's coming to you because they need robust IT service management, and backup is just how you achieve that robustness. And so in sort of the MSP market, you may have non-technical customers who don't really care about the details of which vendor has what features, but all they care about is they can call you if something goes wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah, no, I was just going to jump in, and when you mention, those that aren't sure that they need it, it's surprising that in 2024 that, we're still having those conversations, right?
Absolutely. I think the attitude towards that has changed quite a lot in recent years. I think in some ways, obviously ransomware has made the news a lot, and the risk of losing your whole IT feels so much more severe now, because even businesses that previously had pretty minimal IT needs, everything's it's much more easy to sort of viscerally feel the risk of losing all of that as a non-technical customer, and with ransomware in the news. So I feel like it is easier to sell in that regard. But it's also harder to sell in other regards, because if a lot of the customer's IT is already cloud-based, backup is still needed, but in a quite different way, and so it's a very different conversation again. And they say 75% of SMBs have no disaster recovery plan at all. That's from Continuity Central. So
mind-boggling.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you think about all the the planning and preparation that most small and mid-sized companies go through for other aspects of their business, only to overlook one of the most critical components here, right? And that's really what is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. And I guess as an MSP, it's your job to have that relationship with them and convince the customer that it's needed somehow. The last barrier, I think, is cost. I think cost can still be a barrier. It's pretty hard to compete with low cost offering. OneDrive is built into Windows now, and setting up redirected folders in OneDrive is something. It's not nothing. And as much as I would prefer people to choose our solution, something is better than nothing. So, but OneDrive is just sync. It's not doing anything really clever. It's not SQL Server backup, Hyper-V backup, bare metal disk image, version retention, single pane of glass reporting. So there's a conversation about, do you need these more advanced features? More advanced features usually cost more money. So, but that's just part of how you're designing your IT environment for that customer in the first place.
Yeah, and I think too, when you talk about OneDrive and in that aspect, I mean, sync issues, right? Um, you know, Murphy's Law, of course, applies in here. And, when you might be working on, one of the largest proposals for your organization, and, if there was a sync issue, but then there was some type of disaster, and then there is no backup, you're just hoping that it was going to be done and synced over via OneDrive. You're putting yourself at severe risk there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the monitoring and reporting side of it is hugely risky.
Yeah. Yeah, and in you're right when you mentioned that it's a responsibility to MSP, because we have to have those business conversations. We're not going in there talking about you need to have backup, and the backup can do this, and the backup can do that, and this is the technology that we're using. It's more about the business aspect of it. Of if there were a disaster, these are the ramifications. If there were some type of scenario where a document got overwritten, this is what you can do, right? So it's those business discussions, I think, what will strike a chord with the clients versus talking about the technology itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I can, as a technical person, I can spend all day talking about exactly, how our deduplication works, but that's not exactly
Yeah.
the conversation you have with the end user, is it?
Right, right. And I think we often have those conversations that we're most comfortable with, and that's why I think we go down that technical road. And the more we start shifting that conversation from technical to business, the more we become comfortable with it, and the more it just becomes we do it by rote. And so I think it comes down to just forcing ourselves to understand, what does the client care about, what is going to capture their attention, strike that chord, and move and shift those conversations in that direction. And so I guess moving on from this aspect, what are some things that an MSP should do to maximize data security when they're running backups?
Right. So, um, just building on from the previous thing, almost, saying this is sort of like a conversation. One of the things that I like to do to talk about maximizing your data security, because data security is a big concept, right? And it goes a little bit beyond just backups.
Sure, sure.
And from in my position in the company, I get to oversee a fair amount of, not just the technical aspects, but involvement with other areas of the business. And it's been really eye-opening to have sort of a view into the sales process and see the sales funnel and just learn their sort of terminology and jargon, and the different exercises that you bring from, not just having your technical hat on, but other parts of the business hat on. And from my sort of liability hat, um, the I like to do an exercise here about data security where we, like you said before, we start with the basics. Say a laptop's had coffee spilled on it and it doesn't boot anymore. What do?
Yeah.
You buy a new one and restore it from backup. So step one, have some kind of backup. But then, okay, what about some more difficult scenario? And let's go through sort of increasing levels of more difficult scenario of threat severity and see what your solution can cope with. So let's say instead of a coffee spill, you had a PC that was stolen. you know
Okay.
you still need a backup, but now that laptop really should have had disk encryption, BitLocker, remote wipe from Intune, all of that stuff. Otherwise, that data is at risk in a different way. That's not really a backup issue, but it is a data security issue, and so on. So what if you've got a laptop and it's backing up to an external hard drive, and the external hard drive gets stolen? Well,
Mm,
the backup data storage itself needs to be encrypted, or better yet, store the data somewhere where it can't be stolen, like in the cloud. And there's so many things that could go wrong. What if that encryption, what if the customer forgets their backup passwords? You need to restore a laptop and nobody has the password for it anymore because people have left the company. Well, you need to pick a product with secure, like, account recovery options. Or what if the customer gets ransomware? That's still a somewhat basic one, that we wipe the PC and restore it from backup.
Sure.
The really difficult one is, what if before you can stop it, the ransomware also reaches into the backup storage location, and ransomware is all your backup data as well. And then you want to start thinking about not air-gapped backups, but the sort of modern day version of an air-gapped backup is Comet has a feature to use object lock storage on many cloud providers, where the data gets written once and you have no way to change it. It's sort of a fundamental property of the storage infrastructure. So neither
Yeah.
you nor ransomware pretending to be you can mess with that successful backup job. So 2 clicks, you set that up, and it's sort of a complete defense against ransomware. And there's lots of more questions you can ask, like what would happen in this threat scenario? What if the customer's password gets compromised and someone goes into the backup app and changes all the settings? So I'm successfully backing up, but only this one empty folder, you know, and
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that situation, what do? You need a product that, has policy options that allow the user to prevent changing the settings. What if the sysadmin password gets compromised? You need two-factor or through Azure or Entra. So the questions sort of go on. The question about all the different lines of defense that you have to have in order to have a comprehensive sort of data security posture. But I think if you start with sort of the basic questions, start off with a common problem, and just have this sort of common sense, good answers. And at the end of it, you've actually got this really comprehensive, you can say, here's my risk profile under various threat scenarios. And oh, look, it looks like I have to turn on object lock, turn on two-factor, turn on account recovery. And actually that's going to mitigate all these threat scenarios. And I've got a mitigation plan for sort of when that worst happens.
Yeah, and I think having that documented, having that well documented as far as what those risk profiles are, so that let's say it's a new client, you're in discussion during that assessment phase, ultimately identifying the strengths and weaknesses within their environment. You want to be able to quickly identify those and be able to pull out of the bag of tricks what those solutions are going to be, and it should be well documented. It should be something that just, you're ready to roll. You just, you're like, okay, these are the steps that we're going to take. So there isn't, you're not starting from scratch every time. You're not reinventing the wheel each time. You can implement it, in a flash.
Yeah, absolutely. Having it documented and ready to go is just absolutely brilliant. It is important to think about what each one of these things solves. I think if you think of two-factor as, obviously we all need two-factor, but if you think of it as just a box to check, you're not embracing, what actual threats does this solve for me, because it does solve real threats. So I think it's nice to keep that in mind.
Any tips and tricks that you have from a perspective of boosting productivity, helping to save the help desk, the NOC team, from, the setting up and running of backup operations?
Right. In terms of saving time when running backup operations, I think, a lot of these questions, we think back to what we're selling the customers, and what we're selling them is a reliable IT environment. And how do you get reliability? It means checking in and making sure that everything's working. So the NOC team and people who check on the backup status, check on, the whole IT status. Backup is a sort of a small part of, I think, obviously personally from my position, I think it's a very important part. But from the whole MSP's responsibilities of the IT system, it is just one part among many. And the more seamless and smooth we can make that for you, don't want it to be a frustrating thing to check the backup statuses. So the
Yeah.
way to make this not take up a crazy amount of help desk time is, you want all of the backup information to be single pane of glass, monitoring and reporting, whether that's email, webhook, or just sort of opening up the management console. So I would say centralized remote management has got to be the biggest one in terms of time saving. And if your backup vendor doesn't have remote management, if you're slumming it on the free version of Veeam or whatever, stop it.
Yeah.
That's against the terms of
Right.
service. But sometimes you'll see when a customer's backup is having issues, maybe they're out of storage space, or they changed their domain credentials, or they've moved all their files onto a different drive. It's important that you can go beyond just monitoring. Say you're getting email reports, it's important that you can go beyond just monitoring onto reconfiguration, remediation, without any friction. And so we have a page in Comet we call Recent Activity that gives you sort of a great recent time overview of the last few days on a customer, endpoint by endpoint basis. And it's extremely quick to scope in on failures. One click, you get the settings, fix them all up remotely without even leaving the page.
Oh,
So you
nice.
can just fix
Yeah.
things just while you're there, see it, move on. So that's always nice. I think the other thing that really helps for boosting productivity for help desk and knock type people for new agreements is bulk deployment with silent install. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we've got this feature called lobby mode that we've worked on since the last time we spoke, and it's a new generation of our silent install feature. So Comet supported silent install for a long time, but in terms of how credentials are managed for a endpoint by endpoint device, there were some complications there, but with our new lobby mode, we've got this feature where it's one command in your RMM or Intune. You just pop that command into Intune or into your RMM, Synchro, Halo, whatever, and the silent install connects to the backup server, and you can do it all remotely from there. So it's extremely simple to do sort of a bulk deployment for dozens or hundreds of endpoints.
Yeah, I mean that, in especially in today's world, in the whole work from anywhere, I'm sure you guys are seeing a lot of that. We know that prior to the pandemic, people being able to work from home or work from anywhere was more of a privilege. It was something that was set aside and very unique in certain situations. But it's become a standard since the pandemic, and and when you're working with a remote workforce like that, being able to implement a backup solution, it's critical because the time to be able to go on site to where they are or have their devices shipped to you, whatever the case may be, is just not a efficient or effective way of doing it. So I love hearing those type of solutions, because again, it all comes down to time is money, and MSPs want to be able to do things as quick and efficient as possible, not only for them but also for their clients, because it's not just about us as much as we want to believe that. It's so much more about the client and the implications that it might have for them. And so for let's take a look at maybe there's an MSP that's looking to make a change to their their backup, and what they have in their current stack, and they're looking to evaluate different backup solutions. What are some things that IT pros should be looking for when they're doing those evaluations?
All right. This I can list off 100 great features of our product. I've talked quite a lot today about specific features, Hyper-V, lobby mode, the reporting. But I think when you're comparing backup vendors, you've got to start at the bottom of the pyramid. That's just bringing in another tool from another aspect of the business. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid. People need
Yeah.
people need food and water, and you build on that, and you need to make payroll and pay bills. And then right at the top of the pyramid, I need coffee and memes. I'm sure some people would put coffee in the baseline requirements.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I love the
it's like
memes edition, right?
it's like, yes, I need Hyper-V backups that deduplicate with my VMware backups because I'm saving on storage costs while I'm getting rid of Broadcom. And Comet does give you that. They do dedupe together, but that's top of the pyramid stuff. Let's make sure we've got the basics first at the bottom of the pyramid. And I've got my personal rule of thumb for the basics, which is I strongly suggest finding yourself a backup product that does these three things. Number one, incremental forever. Number two, encrypted. Number three, on cloud storage. That's what everyone should look for. Incremental forever, encrypted, on cloud storage. And lots of vendors can do them. Lots of vendors can do them one at a time, but it can be surprisingly hard to get all three working together. Some vendors will support cloud storage, but you have to do a full re-upload, so they're not incremental forever. And some vendors will support incremental forever, but only if they have access to the encryption key so that they can merge diffs or whatever. So you may as well not
Sure.
have encryption in that case. So getting all three, incremental forever, encrypted on cloud storage, it should be the baseline, the bottom of your needs pyramid, but it can be actually somewhat hard to find. And so
Okay.
that's the basics. And then looking beyond that, I think IT professionals, sysadmins, MSPs in particular, you should be looking for those remote management and silent install, as I said. And then just beyond that, just whatever makes your life easier as an MSP. One thing in particular that makes your life easier, I personally think, is can you meet all of the customer's backup requirements all in one product? So, if the customer needs SQL Server, Linux Cloud, Hyper-V, VMware, bare metal disk image, can they do all of that? And, the basic everyday Windows file and folder backups, can they do that all in one product? Because if you can, then it's a one-stop shop for you to check on the customer's backups. And it's also, a more cohesive look from the customer if all the reporting comes from the same system.
Yeah. I think that is an area that many MSPs are, looking at more and more these days, because it comes down to the vendor fatigue, right? If you have to have three different solutions to be able to tackle different backup type solutions, it's three different solutions that you have to manage. It's three different vendors that you have to manage. And so I think, most MSPs, again, are looking for ways that they can be more efficient, more productive. And, having a vendor that can do it all in one definitely, fits the bill for them. Speaking of in this particular area, let's take a look a little more about from a revenue perspective. Now, I think, most MSPs are going to have this be part of their stack regardless. That is the best way, because backup should be an option at that point. But of course, there are still many clients out there that are in the break fix world, might not be managed clients at this point. And so, you have to work to convince them that business continuity is a must have. How, what are some recommendations that you have to help them understand that?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. When we say MSP, there's a huge range of MSPs, right? From
Yeah.
people who are doing break fix, people who are fully managed, and then even if you are fully managed, full service, there'll be times when you take on existing clients and they've got some existing infrastructure that don't, match your exact vendors. So
Sure.
it is really interesting, because on one hand, as the MSP, you're offering this cocktail of, RMM, hardware, break fix, backups, AV, EDR, servers, 365, help desk, everything, all with a personal touch. And it is interesting to think of it as, all of these services, but, the customer just sees you as you're the IT, you're helping us get back on our feet when things go wrong, right? They come to you when they've got a problem, and no matter what happens, if it's, ransomware, human error, theft, hardware failure, or, coffee just got into every laptop in the building, it's
Yeah.
it's up to the MSP to save the day and rescue the business. And even if you only have a break fix contract, or if you've got a full service contract, you're still going to get called when something goes wrong, and to it's going to be on you to rescue the business, whether it's in the contract or not, to some extent. That's my feeling. And so I think in order to do a really good job as an MSP, you need good tools for rescuing the customer when things go wrong. And backup is an essential tool in your toolbox. It's one tool, not just a tool, but increasingly, recently it's become sort of legal requirements or insurance requirements for a lot of people. But yeah, so I think even if it's not in your contract with the customer, it's likely that it's going to happen, and you should be prepared for it no matter what. So I think you should charge for it. It'll cost the customer, but that's just part of, how do you provide them with a reliable technical environment? Circling back to CrowdStrike for a second, we're a few weeks in, but CrowdStrike is still it's a swear word for a lot of MSPs right now.
Right.
If you were one of the ones putting in an overtime getting systems back online, then thank you for your service, and I hope you got overtime pay. But there's a silver lining to it, which is there's a saying which is no crisis should go to waste. Can you take advantage of this opportunity to talk about why people need backups and to sell people on the idea. If you were crowdstruck, is there a verb for it yet?
I think you just created a new word there.
Crowdstruck. This time people got
Yeah.
lucky and they could run the fix and delete the file that needed to be deleted. But, if things were just slightly different, this could have been a restore from backup scenario. So you just really feel quite a lot more peace of mind having that option in your toolbox, right? And with Comet, you can image a whole Windows PC direct to the cloud, all deduplicated, no special hardware needed, no extra storage disk needed. So imagine if you just had that as a backstop. What's that peace of mind worth to you? Because whatever price you're thinking, Comet's probably cheaper than that, and it's definitely cheaper than having to start, a whole business over from scratch. Because everyone's got a story about when they didn't have backups, right? Not having a backup is one of those extremely sobering moments. When I think of the times in my career that I've had to tell people, sorry, you've lost all your business records since 2005, and now you won't be able to do your tax properly. You feel your mood changing. From my excitable self to sort of deadly serious. They say that 60% of small businesses that have data loss are forced to close within 6 months, and that's from the National Cybersecurity Alliance. So I don't know. I sort of get this sort of post-traumatic dead stare look in my eyes when telling people about it, and I don't know if that's the most effective sales technique. But you think about those bad times, and I can't help it. It does sort of work for me.
Well, I think what's important here is, often when we're just talking about things in general, I think it comes across as, selling on FUD, right? The fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And nobody likes to be, nobody likes to feel as if like they're being pressured, or you're just using fear to try to sell them and convince them that they need to go down this route. But when there are, international headlines like what took place with CrowdStrike, that is the perfect opportunity to have the conversation, with the client, with the prospect, because it's something that, they're hearing about in the news, right? And so it's not like you're coming to them and saying, you have to have this because this could happen. Well, when there are those type of headlines and you can tie it to that, then I think it resonates more, and they are more willing to, listen, and they're more willing to make a decision because they see and they have seen what kind of disaster can happen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you just think if it happens again, we want to be prepared. And, as the MSP, it's my responsibility to, recommend what's going to keep your IT running. And this is just part of it.
Absolutely. So for any of our audience members that, may want to check out Comet Backup, what is the best thing that they can do? And do you guys have, specific trials or any special offers that they can take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can test drive Comet Backup with a 30-day free trial just from our website, cometbackup.com. And if you enter the promo code EverythingMSP when you sign up, we'll give you $50 free credit for your first 90 days with Comet. So an extended free trial and free credit for that using that EverythingMSP promo code.
That's awesome. We appreciate that. We appreciate you helping out our community to give them that test drive. And so as we wrap up here, is there any parting words that you want to share to MSPs? Any specific tip that you just like to throw out that from your experience they should take to heart?
Oh, really interesting question. I'd just say keep doing what you're doing. If you were affected by CrowdStrike, then we really appreciate all of the MSPs out there and sysadmins and help desk people working behind the scenes to keep the whole world running in the event of a disaster like that. And Comet wise, check out Comet. We've got a lot of cool features, and after obviously our recent VMware support, we've also focused on Hyper-V. Hyper-V backup is really fast, sharp, and snappy now. So come check us out with a free trial.
Excellent. Mason, thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate it. It's always great chatting with you. And For everybody out there listening, thank you for your time as well. Until next time, have a great day. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Stack.